Hello everybody, it's March 31, 2025, and I'm going to read a little bit more of the affidavit testimony from Karen Romero, also known as Goodness 8, who passed away October 27, 2024. She was a registered nurse, by the way, an ethical, moral nurse, unlike some of the other nurses we know around here. So anyway, this beautiful little original art is by Linda Russell, and it's entitled Guiding Light, January 6, 2024. It's one of a kind. So here we go. Another doctor at this zoo was a gastroenterologist. He would keep his patients waiting for their procedures for hours, sometimes as long as 4 or 5 hours. They laid on their stretchers very hungry because they had been without food or drink longer than before midnight. Not only were they hungry and thirsty, they were antsy waiting for him. Myself and others would try to reach him so we could tell the patient an estimated arrival time. So one day, who I shall refer to as Dr. Jerkoff, walks in and demands that the nurses start telling the patients that he's dealing with an emergency when they ask where he is and do not call him anymore. But you see, Karen, and she's talking to Karen Stewart, okay? Karen Romero was writing this testimony to Karen Stewart, a retired NSA intelligence analyst. And that's what targeted people do, is we offer written testimonies and we ask our other friends to keep them safe. Unfortunately, Karen Romero has had a lot of my personal information somewhere on her laptop. I don't know where it is now, but anyway, she says, and I added, what I said to the patient is, I am so sorry that you have had to wait. And when I was asked where he was at, I said again that I was sorry that I really didn't know where he was. And added this, but when he comes in, you can certainly ask him. I think if you are sincerely sorry, and I was, most patients are truly understanding. Anyway, that has been my experience. Well, Dr. Jerkoff didn't care for the fact that not all the nurses would lie for him. He started reporting the nurses for not lying for him. I said to one of my coworkers that if they come to me and complain, I still will not lie for him. They didn't approach me with his complaint, probably because they knew that what my answer would be, Karen, if you could all help, don't go to an HCA hospital. They used to be Columbia Hospital. Some of the Columbia hospitals across the country were sued for negligence and damages done to patients. They started to get real bad reputations, so these Einsteins changed the name of the hospitals to individual names. When I first started working there, it was in fact called Columbia. Some patients did ask if this was a Columbia hospital. I said at one time it was. Again, I was not willing to lie for this hospital or their doctors or staff. After years of being a patient advocate, I started to be one for myself as well. I became even more conscientious than I already was. I had worked there from 1997 to 2004. The most incredulous thing that happened there was being told to do Medicare fraud in a place that had already been fined for Medicare fraud. Anyway, I had enough of what was happening around me, particularly this hospital, and also finding out about the property deed tampering that was being done. Oh, these nefarious people, they just love to play around with other people's property, right? So I went to the FBI in Las Vegas to talk with somebody. A woman, so-called agent, sits down to speak with me and says, "What name do you go by?" I said, "Karen Romero." She asked, "Any other names?" I said I used to go by the name Karen Peterson. I told her Peterson is the last name of my first husband. I told her that I kept my maiden name When I married a second time years later, she looked at me as if I was lying. She asked, "Don't you go by the name of Chestnut?" I said, "No, I don't. I didn't even know anyone by that name." I know she still thought I was lying. This woman clearly had no investigative skills whatsoever. I found out about this later on. This woman had an NCIC report on me. On that report, it said Karen Romero, also known as Karen Peterson, also known as Karen Romole, also known as Karen Ann Chestnut. I had no idea who Karen Romole or who Karen Ann Chestnut were, and I sure didn't use either of their names. The reason why she probably honed in on Chestnut's name is because Karen Ann Chestnut had the same exact birthday as me. Oh wow, see, my favorite Bureau of Instigation, doing a great job. They can't even weed out the names correctly here. Please bear with me because this email is going to get longer. I'm thinking I might use parts of this to do my affidavit. And yes, men and women, boys and girls, this is 37 pages long. I'm on page 13 now. It turns out Karen Ann Chestnut was born in New York. I was born in Los Angeles, California. However, I consider Idaho my home state. My parents moved to Idaho when I was only 6 months old. According to the report, Karen Ann Chestnut had blonde hair. I have red hair. Karen Ann Chestnut had blue eyes. I have green eyes. Karen Ann Chestnut was 5'7" tall. I barely make 5 feet tall. Karen Ann Chestnut weighed, if I recall correctly, 125 pounds. At the time, I weighed a little less than this, maybe 120. I now weigh around 136.2. Has been somewhat difficult to lose weight with the programming and also the nanobots. I realize someone can easily change their hair color. I was born with red hair. I still have red hair, with help from a bottle of hair color to cover up the gray. I also realize someone can easily change their eye color with a pair of contacts, but after reading this report, I was amazed at how stupid this FBI was. I barely make 5 feet tall. She could not see that I'm not Karen Ann Chestnut, who's 5'7". There was a significant height difference between Chestnut and myself. Oh my goodness, this is going to get better, I'm sure. After contemplating this, I believe what happened is she didn't read the NCIC record thoroughly. So she didn't know about the height difference. The bad thing about Karen Ann Chestnut is she's a parent alcoholic and likes to drive drunk. It has been a long time since I read that report. I still have a hard copy of that report. That said, if I recall correctly, Karen Ann Chestnut has been arrested at least twice for drunk driving, but it may have been 3 times. I have never been picked up for drunk driving. When I was young, I may have driven, had maybe too much to drink, and thank God I didn't harm another person or harm myself in a car accident. For years now, I'm usually the designated driver. I had 1/2 bottle of beer at last night's party and waited 2 hours before driving home. Driving and drinking simply are a bad combination. I only occasionally drink, and when I do, I usually have 1 drink at home, not when I go out. Last night was an exception. Of course, I wasn't drunk on 1/2 bottle of beer, but why take the chance? So, more about the stupid FBI woman who didn't tell me her name. Well, at the FBI, fast forward to 2007. It's now 2007. I moved back to Philadelphia. I went back to Philly due to the fact that I had previously worked at a specialty eye hospital for 10 years, from 1986 to 1996. I was at least known for being a quality nurse. People rarely left there, so I thought maybe I could get a job back where I used to work and where they knew me. I was being slandered so much, I thought this might be a good thing to do to alleviate the slandering. Of course, I had discussed this idea with family and a few friends on my tapped phone prior to leaving Las Vegas. So I moved back to Philadelphia, and it turned out they had sold the hospital. Yet another disappointment. The good news was they had created a network of ophthalmology surgery centers, and I was working at one of them. I'm there for a while, and one day we had a luncheon for the staff, and the director over all the directors of nurses at the various network of surgery centers was going to be there. She was my boss's boss. You would have thought, wait, let me get my scroll here. You would have thought that Jesus Christ was joining us for all the buzz that was going on about her coming to this luncheon. Her coming there would have been like you sharing a luncheon with Hayden. Well, guess who this woman was? Her name was Yvonne Bly. Spelling may be incorrect, B-L-Y, on the last name. I walk into the room where the luncheon was set up with the intent to hurry and eat and get back to pre-op where we had many patients. Well, lo and behold, this was the same woman that decided I was Karen Ann Chesna, who I previously spoke with at the Las Vegas FBI. I kid you not. Here I am in Philadelphia. And she's in Philly too. Talk about a psyop. I knew this was not a coincidence. I knew this as well as my own name, which happens to be Karen Marie Romero, not Karen Ann Chesna. I thought, oh, no, you don't. I didn't confront her. I wanted to, but I didn't. I told myself she wouldn't be visiting this surgery center much. And by this time, I needed the job. Plus, I liked the kind of work I was doing. When I think of her or talk about her, I often refer to her as FBI RN Yvonne. I don't think they knew at this surgery center that she was also FBI. Back in Las Vegas, I thought maybe she was an agent, but maybe she was simply a lying dirtbag informant for the FBI. Oh, we don't know anything about those lying dirtbag informants, right? This woman does not have a clue how to even take care of a patient correctly, and I would never want her taking care of any of my family member, friend, and for that matter, any patient. Well, the director of the surgery center, my boss, was not wrapped too tight. I work with a staff RN who happened to be black. The patients loved her. She was a stickler about doing things the right way, and of course I loved that about her. Unfortunately, this surgery center and the hospital that had been sold had many problems with racism also. True racism. I never liked racism at the hospital, and I sure didn't like it at the surgery center. This RN and a surgery tech were victims of real racism at this place. I saw it firsthand. This RN decided she couldn't take it anymore, so she quit. I was so sorry to see her go and was disgusted by the racial tension in the place. The director of nurses, Carolyn, was furious about her quitting. She comes out of her office one day to vent to myself and another RN. She yells that she purposely quit and left her in a bind, and now she has to replace her. Well, she quit because she was tired of dealing with racism. Carolyn made over $100,000 a year, and her job is hiring people. So, as Carolyn is going on and on with vitriol about this RN, I think I said something like this to Carolyn. I don't think she intended to put you in a bind. My boss then calls her the N-word. I despise that word. Then she gets about 2 inches from my face and really yells at me and says, "Quit being so fucking nice." Quote unquote. I kid you not. I tell you, Karen, this was quite a shock to me. I thought with all I had been through, I don't have to endure this crap from her, especially at this day and age. I was worn out by this time with the continued gang stalking, slander, vandalism, remote neural monitoring, cop abuse, break-ins, theft, being illegally thrown out of 2 apartments in each apartment complex, keeping my deposit, keeping my money that I had paid ahead in rent. I was also targeted by neighbors in apartments on each side, and oftentimes below me and above me. And yes, it was neighbors that were involved. I do know some say it isn't the neighbors. They just make you think it is the neighbors. In my case and in your case, it has been the neighbors involved. Oh, yeah. I can prove that my neighbors are involved, right? I can prove it. It's all over my channel, right? All the neighbors, all of them. Although I was grateful I had a job, the boss woman thinks it's okay to use the N word and talk to me like she did right up in my face. Not okay. So at this point, I was like, enough is enough. I decided to rat my boss out. I had already whistleblown before this, so what the heck? So I guess who I ratted her out to, none other than her boss, who was the FBI RN Yvonne. It was now 2009. I asked my boss to please join our meeting because I was going to discuss something that was troubling me. She declined. Ask me if I care. I don't. But at least I did the right thing by alerting my boss to this. I don't care if I gave her time to think up lies. Excuse me. More important to me is to do the right thing. I had no intent of confronting FBI RN Yvonne with her actual FBI status. But I had every intent of reporting my boss for what I feel is unacceptable behavior. A few days later, FBI RN Yvonne and I had a little meeting. I told her what occurred that day between Carolyn and I. She sat there with the same smug, poker, stoned face that she had in the FBI office in Las Vegas. Had I just kept quiet, I would have lost all respect for myself. No way was I going to lose respect for myself for a bunch of dirtbag, low-life scum. Anyway, FBI RN Yvonne didn't say a word. Why is that? Because in 2008, an employee at another surgery center was suing this network for guess what? Racism. Seems like Yvonne had another problem to contend with. One that she could not turn her back on, squirm out of. Talk about karma. In addition to this, shortly before, or rather shortly after, I received an actual call from the RN that had quit. She called me at work and didn't know my home number. She too was going to file a suit against the surgery center network. She asked if I would give a statement to her lawyer. She knew I had seen the racism firsthand. However, she didn't know about the incident with Carolyn. She had already quit before that happened. Because I was still working at the place, I told her I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to follow through on her request. I apologized to her for this, and then I told her if her lawyer gave me a subpoena, I would be more than happy to talk. These were not my exact words, but very similar as I'm paraphrasing. I didn't tell her the incident with Carolyn that occurred after she left. So guess what happened a short time after the meeting with FBI RN Yvonne? I got fired. I had never been fired at any job prior to this. Personally, looking back on this, I think the FBI had plotted and planned to have me fired anyway. They knew I was going back to Philadelphia by listening in on my tapped phone when I was in Las Vegas. I think the whole thing was a setup. Their goal is to make someone homeless and destroy their life. In no way did I allow myself to be affected for being fired. I know what kind of an RN I am, and that happens to be a very good RN. And I could top FBI RN Yvonne any day of the week on the proper care of a patient. By her devious and inappropriate behavior, she would make every good RN in this country embarrassed by her actions and what she's doing in the field of nursing. The day I got fired, I did ask, why is that? The reptilian HR thug tells me she didn't have to tell me why. Well, that isn't exactly true due to the fact that in Pennsylvania, it is not a right to work state. Again, with no regard for the laws. The reptilian pig tells me to go to my locker and clear it out and go. I didn't feel like arguing with the snake, so I went to my locker. At the foot of my locker is a pamphlet for mental health issues, which had been strategically placed there, of course. Another BS move on their part. Oh, the psychological operations. This is just nasty, nasty, nasty stuff. I mean, people are mean. Now I was unemployed. Again, it would be harder to get a job since I had been fired. I decided I would go across the country. Again, determined I would find another job. Thank God I did apply for unemployment and was not turned down. A big real silver lining, I had also never been on unemployment compensation prior to this. A few days before leaving, I went to the post office to get my mail. I came out and was sitting in my car reading my mail when a cop approached my car. This was in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. I rolled down the window, and he asked for my driver's license. I asked, why? Please bear with me momentarily while I back up a little bit. I had what I believed to be a plotted and planned car wreck while in Pennsylvania. Compliments of the dark side. Thank God no one was hurt. The wreck actually resulted in 2 fender benders. My vehicle and the other vehicle. I felt the dirtbag in the other vehicle was a gang stalker. The cop came to the scene and took my driver's license. The car was able to be moved to a parking lot. After he finished up, I asked him for my driver's license. He refused to give it back to me. I said, okay then. I walked home and left my car. A friend of mine picked up my car because now I had no driver's license. The next day I walked to a place that had contracted with Pennsylvania to be an outlet of sorts for the DMV. I got a new driver's license. I walked back home. In the mailbox the next day was my driver's license that the cop had refused to give back to me. It hadn't been mailed to me. It was simply sitting in the mailbox. Well, this same cop is the one that showed up at the post office with the intent to beat me. So when he asked for my license, I wanted to know why. Since he had stolen my license previously, he told me he got a call that I was speeding on the interstate. I said something like, "Did you see that? Or is that even in your jurisdiction?" I knew it wasn't. He started yelling at me. Wait. He started yelling at me to get out of the car. I started to open my car door. This young kid, who I gave a hard time believing was a cop, and this other cop pulled me out of my car, threw me down on the cement parking lot, and beat me up. Now, mind you, remember, she's under 5 feet tall. I didn't resist, but it did hurt. They put my hands behind my back and made the cuffs really tight. My hands and fingers started to feel numb because the blood circulation was being compromised from the tight cuffs. I said a few choice swear words about this. They toted me off to jail in the little tiny township where the police department was. While they got me out of the car, one on each side, they began to pull me in opposite directions, and that really hurt. Remember, she's 5 feet tall. The cuffs were so tight, that made things worse. And they did this on purpose. The tiny police department only had one jail cell, no bars, just a heavy steel door with a tiny window. I sat there and I cried. I was in there for only a brief time. I called out and said, "Are you going to let me out and tell me what I'm being charged with?" They let me out after this. This is all retaliation. I had abrasions on my knees and wrists with a small amount of bleeding. A day later, I had many bruises. Anyway, the chief of police took me to his office and said, I said swear words, and that's why I was arrested. Mind you, I said the swear words as they were beating me up. And I'm going to just say it off the record here. Swearing is not a crime. If you could find swearing as a crime, please leave a comment down below. I told him what they did and how they made the cuffs too tight. He smirks and said, "Yeah, that happens sometimes." It turns out the young cop was his son. He told me this, so again I say, I don't believe that young guy was a cop. I may be wrong, but he could have borrowed a cop uniform and been playing cop for the day. He was worse than the other cop. Anyway, the chief said he was going to let me go and walked me outside. I said, "Will this be a misdemeanor? Because I have to alert the nursing board if so." He said, "No, don't alert the nursing board. This is only an infraction, like a traffic ticket. He tells me I need to learn how to keep my mouth shut. Oh my goodness, you're telling the wrong woman. I felt like telling him to F off, but I didn't. He said this is really no big deal and gave me his card. He wrote something like this was an infraction on the back of the card. He offered me a ride back to my car at the post office. I said, no, thank you. I walked back to my car. I took this whole incident to court. I was that pissed off. I had a friend to take pictures of the damage they did to my body, and also they broke a new flip-flop I had. I felt like they needed to pay for their crime. I sent in pages of discovery to the judge prior to court. I went to court and the one cop admitted to stealing my driver's license. I asked the judge to look at my pictures of how I was abused. He yelled at me, refused to do so, and threw me out of the little tiny kangaroo court. I started to leave and the chief of police came up to me and again wanted to go outside to talk. He said the charges would be dropped and he was going to have all the court fees that I had spent on this refunded back to me. He told me I needed to get out of Pennsylvania. Can you believe this? Probably was already aware of. I did give back the money 5 or 6 years later. So now I'm going across country looking for jobs. It is, if I recall correctly, October 2009. I'm sleeping in motels or in my car at rest stops. I even showered at truck stops prior to some interviews. I slept in my car sometimes to save money. I only had unemployment checks, which would eventually run out, my 401k money, and what little was in my checking account. I saw that this might be difficult to get a job now that I was fired. I'm very optimistic and determined, but I'm also a realist. And since I chose not to keep my mouth shut about the injustices being done to me like the cop instructed me, I knew how they could deplete more of my money, doing so in legal ways, of course. I applied for jobs in Wisconsin, Minnesota. I even got a nursing license in Minnesota, which cost me money. Colorado, Carson City, Las Vegas, Nevada, Arizona, Idaho, and California. Not necessarily in that order. It's hard to recall. I think there may have also been some other states as well. I applied for so many jobs, close to 100 jobs. And at this time, without digging through all of my documentation, I think I only got 7 interviews that I recall at this time. 3 in Idaho, 1 in Wisconsin, 1 in Colorado, 1 in Nevada, and 1 in Arizona. No job offer. Why? Because they called Philadelphia, where I got fired. I would expect them to do that. Who knows what lies they were told about me. When I first started out on this journey across the country, I went to Sedona, Arizona for a few days to re-energize and think things over. I had to renew my strength, and I knew this was going to be a rather tough ride. I did apply for jobs along the way, and after Arizona, I went back to Idaho. I had not actually moved back to Idaho yet. I wanted to see if I could first get a job back in my home state. I naively thought it would be better in Idaho. In a way, it was better due to the fact that I knew my way around, particularly Boise, where I grew up. In some of the states across the country, I got lost. It wasn't always easy to find places. I relied on good old-fashioned maps. I didn't have GPS or a phone with GPS. Sometimes I did not have a phone. They hacked and ruined so many of mine. I have a very large bag of phones with proof showing how they hacked them so they were not able to be used. It wasn't easy to find a payphone either. They had taken most of the public payphones out of places. I did find some payphones at Walmarts, and believe it or not, that is what I used many times to make calls. I also used the phone at Goodwill in Flagstaff, Arizona. Anyway, it's 2009. I'm searching for a job. I get 3 interviews in Boise. 2 were at hospitals, 1 at a surgery center. I was staying in a motel that actually had free laundry, so that saved me a bit of money. It was a decent motel, too. I only had enough money to stay a few weeks at that time, until my next unemployment deposit came through. I had to go to the nearest rest stop and sleep in my car for 4 or 5 days at a time. Then back to, wait, I've got to scroll to the next page. Then back to the motel. I even told the motel people that I would be back as soon as I received my check, but in the meantime, I was in a fight with the government and had to go to the local rest stop to sleep in my car. Prior to this, I had called the Department of Transportation and told them about my situation, and I asked if I could sleep in my car at the rest stop. The woman said I could, but not past 8 hours at a time. I felt so relieved because I didn't want any more cop harassment, and I certainly didn't deserve any cop harassment at all. So one night, 4 cops pull up and swarm my car at the rest stop. I hope the bullies are proud of themselves, because if they're not already regretting this, they soon will be on a karmic level. A few of the thugs were federal, and the others were local. One of the bullies is the same cop that pulled me over later in Nevada. He's a piece of garbage in every way. They tried to steal my driver's license in Nevada, but that came later on. Anyway, the 4 piece of garbage bullies said I could not stay there. I explained that I called ahead and got permission. They didn't care. I'm quite surprised they didn't pull me out of the car and beat me up like they had done in Pennsylvania. When I first inquired about sleeping in the car, there was no sign posted about the rest stop rules. Later on, there was suddenly a sign that had been posted saying, "You can stay 8 hours." And later on, I got stopped by a state trooper who told me to leave. I told him the sign says it's okay to stay 8 hours. He wanted me to get out of the car and go read the sign. I had already read the sign, and he knew that. I figured if I got out of the car, he would beat me up and lie and say I attacked him. So I told him, "No, you go. You go ahead and read the sign. I don't have my shoes on. Besides, I will leave like you told me." He was awful. Looking into his eyes was awful. Everything about him was awful. I truly felt like he was a cop that lied and abused. You know, Karen, I used to believe that most cops were good and honorable. How naive. I didn't know they had become abusive to so many people. I knew about the Rodney King incident years ago, but I thought it would be a very isolated incident. How naive of me. Anyway, I had to go somewhere else to park that night. Probably the most difficult thing about being homeless, sleeping in your car, is finding a place near a public bathroom to park for the night. I had to be very resourceful. It really helped knowing the area, though. I would thank God frequently that I had grown up in Boise. I went from the south end of Idaho all the way to the north end, up by Canada. I applied for several jobs throughout of the state, to no avail. When I was up north near Canada, I got stuck for 3 days at a rest stop due to the fact that my unemployment deposit had not come in yet again. I had very little food in my car and very little gas, and that said, it was a nice rest stop, and I was so thankful cops did not bother me there. Well, I finally got my unemployment deposit and headed south back to Boise. It looked like a surgery center I applied at might come through. After the interview, I had called her and was very interested in working there. She kept dangling on me a decision with what I started to feel was a concocted delay. I believe that was a setup, due to the fact when she finally did call back after about 3 or 4 weeks, I had decided to bag the whole thing and leave Idaho. I needed a job, and it was obvious I wasn't going to get one in my home state at that time. It was about 6 hours out of Idaho when she left a message on my phone to call. I did not give her the courtesy of returning the call, which is unlike me. But I felt so strongly it was a setup, to be abused with the filthy lies across the country. It's bad enough. But I've had that happen to me in my home state was devastating at that time. The people in Idaho, including the nursing board, bowed down to the FBI there. The nursing board even hung up on the phone on me when I was asking a simple question. They had no right to do that. Here's the thing. It really was the nursing board. Sometimes the FBI would intercept my calls and pretend they were the person I was calling. Well, yeah, that happens to me too. But with the nursing board, I truly felt it was them. The arrogant female hung up on me, probably instructed to do so by the arrogant, lowlife FBI. They knew hanging up on the phone was unacceptable. At that time, I felt like the nursing board was not being able to discern that I'm a very good nurse that had been lied about. This is of great concern to me that these RNs are not the sharpest knives in the drawer. Maybe they're in the right job there instead of actually caring for patients. RNs like this usually do not give quality care to patients. However, they're real good at paperwork and listening to lies. They usually have a very little common sense and practically zilch critical thinking skills. God forbid if they for 1 minute stopped and thought if lies could be told about a particular nurse, that it could also be done to each of them. So I'm going to end here because this is I'm now going to be on page 21, where her unemployment checks were stopped. Okay, so this is part 2 of Affidavit Testimony, Karen Romero. Rest in peace, Karen. We're reading your testimony. I completely forgot that I had it, and I'm so glad that you gave it to me. And everybody's going to know about you. Everybody's going to know your story and what was done to you at under 5 feet tall. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. I'm signing off now. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. It helps the channel grow, get the message out there, and please share this video.